Let me paint the picture. You're a business owner and you've worked your whole life to retire. But when you get to that point, you discover you haven't built value in your business and you don't understand how to distribute the wealth you've accumulated. Does this sound like you? Well, if it does, you're going to love this episode. My name is Ryan Smith, and I'm the host of the My SBA Loan Pro podcast. Today, I sit down with Scott Chelberg, President of Retirement Solutions. Scott has built a business guiding successful business owners and entrepreneurs through exiting their business and distributing the wealth they've accumulated. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
Oftentimes, the business owner hears the term exit planning. They think I'm going to do that when I get close to my exit. But exit planning is really just strategic planning. Mm-hmm. And so you should always have begin with the end in mind, as they say. So how should I structure my entity when I start my entity? Or do I need to change the structure of my entity before my exit for tax purposes? And there's a lot that goes into those planning opportunities.
Scott, welcome to the My SBA Loan Pro podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So, Scott, the reason why I asked you here is because you have a specialty niche within the wealth advisory industry, focusing on income wealth distribution instead of accumulation. Please tell us how you got here in life and in your career.
Certainly. Take me back a little bit to University of Nebraska, and I had some really good counseling from a fraternity elder that said, go find out where you want to live and then get the best training company and go work for them. So I did that. I found that I wanted to live in North County, San Diego, and I landed with IDS at the time, which is now Ameriprise, which has been gobbled up by Osaic, et cetera. So anyway, they had the very best training program. And so I start working with clients, and I naturally had this attraction to elderly retired women. And so I worked with a lot of those clients and a lot of widows. And it was pretty cool to be able to be kind of that trusted source for them, almost like a grandson-grandmother relationship. And through that, I end up realizing that a lot of their friends are losing their spouses. And so I wrote a 3-part series called I Lost a Loved One. And we helped a lot of people figure out what to do at each phase of that stage of, grieving and then moving on to your next chapter in the last part. And when doing that, we realized that we're working with a lot of constrained investors, and these widows don't have a lot to work with. So we have to make a little go a long way. And so we really mastered the income distribution phase of the financial planning. And so we call that the income for life model, which David Machia labeled years ago with his software. And so we've continued to work with that process.
Got it. Yeah. So I want to distinguish between a lot of advisors, whether they're registered investment advisors, wealth advisors, who are primarily working with people during the accumulation phase. Mm-hmm. But you have a niche in the distribution phase.
Correct.
And so what I'm excited to do is really just land on that, go deep, and have you talk about who's your ideal client, when should they come to you, what if, for example, they come to you and they haven't been prepared, maybe they're a little older, what can you do for them? Or those who come to you and they are prepared. So if you can start diving deep into who's your ideal client and what do you do for them?
Well, we call our ideal client Tired Ted. And so Tired Ted is typically in his early 60s. He's a business owner, very successful. And he's at the stage of life where he would like to be able to retire, but he really isn't sure that he can afford to, because he has a fantastic life because of all the fruits of his labor and the benefits of having a business. Mm-hmm. So he runs a lot of his expenses through the business, and he has a 401k, and the wife may work in the business and help out. But the question is, how much is my business really worth? And after the transaction costs and the taxes, is that going to be enough to replace the income that I've been drawing out of the business? Mm-hmm. And so that's where we really come in, as we do a wealth plan, a financial plan for that business owner, and identify what they have and what they need. And if there's a gap there, we call that a wealth gap. And so then we have to go to work on that closing that wealth gap. And that wealth gap may be several $1 million. And of course, if they're a business owner, the best way to close the wealth gap is to look at the business and say, well, how can we increase the value of that business? A couple clients I just had recently, they had a $5 million business. We needed to take it up to about $7.5 million to net enough proceeds for them to really support their lifestyle comfortably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of business owners, and on a day-to-day basis, they're focused on their employees, their vendors, driving profitability, driving revenue, preparing their taxes, et cetera. So they're focused on things that are right in front of them.
Correct.
How can you speak to them right now to say, hey, if you're at that age or you're nearing that age, maybe take your eyes up a little bit and start thinking about how you're going to live after you sell the business?
Well, you've heard the saying, work on your business, not in your business.
Yes.
So now we're going to work on your life and not on your business.
Love it.
And so when we're working on our life, we're identifying like, really, what is this all about? I mean, why do I have this business? And it's to support the business owner and their family and their causes that they care about. But how do we maximize that and then be able to go on to the next chapter of their life? And so identifying what they need and then closing that wealth gap by closing the value gap of the business. And we compared their business valuation to best in class in their industry. And we identify where they may be falling short. And then fortunately, with the connections through provisors, we're able to bring a lot of talented people in and help that business owner close that value gap in the business. And then we have enough money now, once we sell that, to support that ideal retirement lifestyle.
Got it. So you hit on it, but I want you to dive deep now. When is it ideal for that business owner, he or she, to come to you so that you can maximize the value that you bring?
5 years or before exit is ideal because we have multiple tax strategies that we can start to implement. So if you're an S Corp, you might want to convert to a C Corp for 1202 purposes. So that 5-year runway is ideal. Plus, we're probably going to need some time if we do have a wealth gap. We need to have some time to close that value gap in the business. So about 5 years prior, but we work with a lot of clients that are tired, Ted, and they don't have 5 years left in them. And so that means we just have to speed up the runway.
Got it. So what if they haven't been prepared? They come to you, they have a shorter runway, and they haven't been properly prepared for the income distribution phase?
Well, depending on how much they've saved, right? If we have a few more years, we'll put them through our retirement rescue program, which basically says we are 100% focused on gathering enough assets and maximizing what you have, highest and best use of every single asset. You may have rental properties that really aren't performing up to snuff, right? So you need to maybe 1031 exchange those into something that performs better, or you need to refinance them so they get better cash flow. So every asset has to be working as hard as it possibly can for that business owner so they can close that gap.
Got it. So if they're not prepared, what's the best you can do? Let's say they come to you 1 to 2 years before they say, hey, I want to sell my business. And unfortunately, they haven't been properly prepared with another wealth advisor or investment advisor. What's the best you can do?
Well, what we end up doing a lot of times, and this is pretty frequent, is we model out what would happen if we relocated, and we pull out the equity in their home and move to a less expensive area.
So we're in San Diego, California.
Right.
And if they're in their 60s, it's likely they've owned their home for 20 to 30 years.
Right.
And so they have equity because of where we live. And now they're able to sell that home and relocate after they sell the business. Absolutely.
So moving to a lower tax income state, less expensive cost of living. Oftentimes it's driven by where their grandchildren are. So they find their grandchildren are up in Boise, Idaho, or their grandchildren are in Florida or Texas or wherever, lower income states. They're open to the concept of relocating. So that's one option. The other one is just really shrink their lifestyle down because they know they've been enjoying a great lifestyle with the business, and then just see what that looks like for them and if they're comfortable with shrinking their lifestyle down. But we don't want to shrink it down too much. We don't want them to have what we call a porch retirement, where the only thing they could do is hang out and watch the world go by. We want them to be able to have their ideal retirement lifestyle.
Yeah, it would be a shock, for example, if they enjoyed a certain lifestyle with the business, vacations, restaurants, all of those things. And then, for example, they sell and now they don't have the income that they used to. And like you said, they have to shrink where they can't really enjoy the rest of those things that they did before. So now what I'd like you to do, Scott, is talk about that client that comes to you and they're ready. You have a lot of tools in the tool shed to work with.
That's a dream client, and they're a lot of fun. You kind of get really excited about the opportunity to work with someone like that because you have what I call a large menu of options and planning. So typically what we're going to do is do their personal financial plan and understand what they're going to need, and we know what they have and they have enough. So now we need to bring in the exit planning team, right? So the first person is a really good tax accountant who's going to strategize with them on how we're going to structure the deal so we can minimize the income taxes. Then comes the investment banker and the transaction attorney. So we make sure that the deal gets the highest price and it's a real clean deal. No, not long-term earnouts or anything like that. So a clean exit. And then our payday really comes in when that wire comes in from the sale of the business. And so then we go to work and we do another financial plan, the income distribution model, or the lifetime income model. And so what that looks like is we silo time frames of money. So if you could picture walking into a warehouse, your first drawer of money is 5 years worth of very liquid investments. And you draw on that to supplement what we call your floor income. Your floor income is your guaranteed income that's going to be coming in from Social Security or rental properties, or if you have a pension, which are very rare. And so we have those fixed income. We know what the expenses are. Well, there's a gap there, so we have to close that gap with the proceeds from the investment portfolio. So that first 5 years of liquid investments is available, and they draw on that to close that gap. And then the second 5 years, that money is invested in something that's fixed and guaranteed that we know it's going to be there, and we adjust their cost of living to inflation. So we know we're going to have a bigger pile of money to replace the silo 1 in 5 years. And then we have the silo 3, 4, and 5, which are longer term investments where we can actually bring on some risk. So you've heard of the 60-40 portfolio where you have 60% stock, 40% bonds. We like a 50-30-20, 50% equity, 30% fixed income, 20% alternatives. And that'll weather the storm much better for them when you have the economic conditions going up and down and the market going up and down. So you have those dollars that are not going to be tapped for 15 to 20 years, and they're legacy dollars if you have silo 6 and 7. So that's kind of our income distribution plan. Once they are retired and we receive that wire, what do we do with it?
So I like what you said there. So the first thing is you act as the quarterback, number one. You're the expert, you're outside of their business, and what you're able to do is focus on the future. You're working with what you have, but if they've done a good job to that point, you can maximize the resources that they already have.
Absolutely.
Then you bring in your resources, so your specialty third-party service providers who specialize in their particular niche. So we're working with experts all around.
Right.
And from that point, they have a game plan, as opposed to so many people who don't have a game plan, right?
Absolutely. And that's oftentimes the business owner hears the term exit planning. They think I'm going to do that when I get close to my exit. But exit planning is really just strategic planning. And so you should always begin with the end in mind, as they say. So how should I structure my entity when I start my entity? Or do I need to change the structure of my entity before my exit for tax purposes? And there's a lot that goes into those planning opportunities.
Yeah. And so, Scott, I've known you for a long time, as I've already said. I've never heard anyone talk about your niche other than you. So what I'd like you to do now is talk about what differentiates you from someone who only focuses on the accumulation phase. And for those people watching, what should they listen for, or what should they question? Why haven't I heard this from my advisor?
Well, I think, unfortunately, in our industry, there's a lot of confusion as to what the difference is between a financial advisor, a wealth advisor, an investment advisor, et cetera. And we typically can all use the same titles, but if you're an investment advisor only, you're probably focusing on the accumulation phase, and you're helping people manage their investments, whether it's inside their retirement plan, their 401k, their IRAs, their SEPs, et cetera, and outside their retirement plans. And so they're just focused on that. Whereas a true wealth advisor is much more than that. Investment's an important part, but imagine most people are concerned about their fees. And so they look at their investment advisor and say, well, you're 20 or 30 or 40 basis points more expensive. Well, maybe, but they don't even look at your tax returns, which could be 30 to 40 to 50% of your proceeds of your income. So let's concentrate on all the real important things like estate planning and proper protection, whether, a peril could happen to you or your business, et cetera. And look at the whole picture, not just investments. So a true wealth advisor is going to be looking at everything holistically, have a written financial plan, a written action plan, and as you said, a game plan with all your other experts on the team, and everybody's working for the benefit of the client.
What I have found, Scott, and my value is I will pay for experts, because what I have discovered is when I pay for experts, I actually come out on top, because there's a lot of money to be found, just like you said, right? So you look at tax returns, you look at the holistic picture, and what you're able to do then is actually create more value than the cost of your services. Do you think that's accurate?
That's 100%. I think that was so well said. And I wish more people would really understand it that way. It makes a big difference when everything is coordinated. And unfortunately, when we see mistakes, it's typically because everything wasn't coordinated.
Yeah.
So they don't have the shares of their corporation in their living trust. They don't have proper coordination with their property and casualty insurance. And so there's a gap there. That gap gets exposed, and that gap is expensive.
Yeah. And, so I own, obviously, think SBA, and then I was able to acquire a business last year. And all of these things that you're speaking about, I have no clue. And I want you to now talk about that person like me, 40s and 50s. What can they start doing now to make sure they're ready for you so that you can maximize when they do sell that business? Because maybe one day, I'm not planning on selling the Sky Zone right now, but who knows? Maybe my partner and I in 10, 15, 20 years say, hey, you know what? Let's sell it and let someone else run it. What should I be doing? What should other business owners be doing, 40s, 50s, to prepare for that exit and to be ready for you?
Well, the first thing you need to do is do some financial planning. Okay. I like to call it life planning. So sit down with your spouse and identify what are your goals? You want to educate your children. You want to retire at a certain lifestyle. What is that going to take to get there? And then put together a game plan with the wealth advisor to do that. And the key component is when you're putting money aside, understand the taxation of how that money is going to come out to produce income. So think about the end in mind again. So you're getting to a stage where you're on the off ramp, you're selling your business, you're moving into the income distribution phase of your life. What if you have everything in a 401k IRA and so it's now coming to you taxable?
Yeah, talk about that. So they focus on how it's going in.
Yeah.
And then they look at it increase. But what you do is you focus, okay, this is how it comes in, but really think about the end. Think about how it goes out.
Absolutely.
So
that's crucial.
Talk about where it should go in and what that division looks like.
Well, so you have a 401k and you put that money in. It looks great, right? Because you're getting a tax break. It's going in pre-tax. It's growing tax deferred, but it's coming out taxable. And being from Nebraska, understanding crops, we would rather pay the tax on the seed, not the harvest.
I love it.
And so what happens with a lot of people is they use a 401k and they pay the tax on the harvest.
Yes.
Right. And so now if you make too much money, you don't qualify for a Roth, but a lot of 401k plans offer a Roth option and it's not dictated on how much income you make. So you're able to participate in your Roth option in your 401k. So think about that distribution phase is how's my money going to come to me? So I love real estate. I love rental properties, right? Because you get the depreciation today, but the challenge is that income's coming to you taxable, right? And so that's something to be aware of. So do you have some tax-free buckets, like maybe some municipal bonds, or do you have Roth IRAs, or even better, do you have permanent life insurance properly structured where it provided for your family in the event of your premature death. But when it comes time to enjoyment, now you can turn around and use it as your own bank and pay yourself a tax-free income with properly structured. And so now you have 2 or 3 different buckets of money that you can pull from. 401k, taxable. Roth, tax-free. Life insurance, tax-free. Muni bonds, tax-free. So now you have that flexibility, and tax-free income is wonderful, because a big misconception is people think they're going to survive off of or live well off of about 70% of what they're doing today during retirement. And I will tell you that when you're retired, every day is a Saturday. So you're doing everything.
That's right.
Yeah, you're doing your errands, you're having fun, you're going out to dinner, you're traveling more. You want that ideal retirement lifestyle, not that porch retirement lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a lot of money. So if you can produce tax-free income to pay for that, you're going to be so much better off.
Yeah. And so without, giving names, are there individuals out there who focus on the accumulation phase that you would say really do prepare people when they need you? Are there individuals out there that you know? Or if it's, for example, me or someone in my shoes who's 50 and they're not really thinking about exiting their business for 15, 20 years, should they come to you now? Should they just let you see what they're doing? Would you just kind of bless it and say, hey, yeah, this looks good, come to me later? How would that interaction work?
Well, Ryan, you'd be surprised how many times we do what we call a no obligation second opinion.
Okay.
So what we do is we just say, here, come on in. Spend 45 minutes with me. Show me what you're doing. Let's talk about your strategy. If you have a written plan, let's review it and see. And I might just say, you know what, go back to your advisor. They're doing a really good job. Just tweak this or tweak that, or maybe give it a full blessing. Very rare, but most of the time. A lot of the accumulation specialists are younger in this industry, and so they don't have the full experience.
Talk about that, because it's the same in my industry. We're seeing right now where a lot of the, as my kids would call them, old heads, or unks, right? So they're retiring, but they have all of this IP, right? They're smart. They've been there, done that. They know where all the traps are. And so, but they're retiring. So we've got all of these young bucks out there, and they're good at churning. They're good at working hard, but they don't know what they could potentially do that would get people in trouble. They're really just focused on, okay, I'm providing for my family. I'm going to close this loan. This is my commission.
Right.
Talk about that.
That's pretty common. So you have people out there that are just selling investments, whether they're selling annuities or just selling life insurance, et cetera. And the challenge with that is they're not looking at it holistically. Like you said, they're supporting their family. They're probably not doing a lot of harm for their client, but it's not coordinated again. So it's not done with the master plan. Like you might need life insurance or you might not, or maybe you need term versus permanent. So those are the types of things that happen. So you have to be aware of those types of individuals, and they really come out of the woodwork when it's announced that you sold your business.
Yes.
Because that's when you're going to be solicited like crazy. Like, hey, Ryan, heard you sold your Sky Zone.
Yep.
Right. And so they're going to be coming at you wanting to invest your money. And you're going to be able to sit back and say, no, it's okay. I've had a master plan all this time. I'm just continuing to execute it. I'm now in the distribution phase of my life instead of the accumulation phase.
So tell us what those foxes look like so that people can be aware and beware of them when they come out of the woodwork.
Well, typically they're out there selling something that's going to be commission based. Okay. So they're going to be selling annuities and life insurance. And not to say that's bad, right? Those are, if they're properly structured, and there's a huge difference between a properly structured life or annuity than something that's structured for the benefit of the advisor. And so be on the lookout for somebody who's just selling product, selling investments. A lot of the individuals that are sitting inside of a bank are selling investments, and they're probably doing an okay job, but they're not looking at everything else. They're not looking at your tax returns in the big picture. Are they helping you maximize your 401k or your Roth provisions or other strategies? So those limited view individuals are the people that you really want to stay away from and go towards the people who have the much broader view, the experience. Not to say that you need to have 40 years of experience like I do. You can have 10 years of experience and be very well qualified because you're working with a good firm who trains the big picture.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's great. What I'd like to do now is transition to my client. So my client, for example, comes to me, Ryan, I want to buy a business. Okay, great. So what I do is help them through the loan process. We obtain the loan, they buy the business. Now they're business owners, right? And one of the things you talked about is when individual business owners come to you, you help prepare the business. A lot of businesses, unfortunately, they're not prepared. So what I'd like you to do now is talk to the business owner. They're younger, they've bought a business, and discuss how they can operate their business, right? So I know what you do when the business comes to you, and it's all hands on deck, right? So you're picking up the phone. All right, we need this, we need that. We're calling attorneys, we're calling CFOs, we're calling all these people. But what if they did that for the life of the business? What should they do? So I'd like you to go in detail. What should they do? Who should they have on their staff? And when should they have, like example, what revenue levels should they have? Which type of service providers, whether it's outsourced or whether it's on staff? And then talk about how if they do it early, they're creating that value earlier so that it's not so much of a fire drill when they come to you.
Well, we're seeing this a lot where people are leaving corporate America and they're buying businesses, which is fantastic. It's the American dream. And so starting with a really good accountant, a CPA who's going to coach you on the entity style that you should have your entity placed in. So is it an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, right? Making sure that you have really good protection. So you have a good commercial insurance broker that's with you, making sure that you're protected from the perils, especially in the state of California, and especially if you have employees. So understand that part.
Yes.
Make sure that you have a good HR consultant who's going to do a handbook for you and keep you out of employee trouble, right? Because that's important. And then you may need ongoing as you get a little bit more sophisticated, more than just your account, but maybe somebody like a controller and help you set your books up properly. And so you have your base team there. And now we need to figure out how do we operate all these different parts. And my recommendation, I love EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. So you could hire an implementer to come in at the beginning of the year, do a master plan for 5, 3, and 1 years, and then break it down into what we call quarterly sprints. This is what everybody on the team needs to accomplish for those 90 days. And then we refresh and do it all over the next quarter. And so you're learning about all the different components of the business. And so now you're operating your business, most importantly for driving value, not cash flow. That's where a lot of business owners get themselves in trouble because they see this cash flow and they start pulling it out for personal reasons, et cetera. Next thing you know, they have a building full of toys and lots of expensive lifestyle. And if you're driving value, you don't write everything off through your business. Because think about this, if you have $1,000 of expenses that really are personal and you get 5 to 10 times EBITDA, that's $5,000 to $10,000 difference in the value of your business.
Yeah.
And typically there's going to be 3 or 4 digits left of that first comma. So we're talking $100,000 to $1 million of expenses. And so now take that times 5 to 10. It's a big difference. So make sure you're driving your business for value, not driving it for profit.
And so the difference for those business owners out there is driving your business for value on the balance sheet.
Yes.
Not just to minimize your tax burden on the profit and loss.
Right.
Because that's what almost every business owner, their first conversation with me, Ryan, hey, I make a lot of money. It might not look like it, but I make a lot of money.
Right.
Well, you know what? If we're going to get a loan, it really needs to look like it.
That's right. You know this story very well, right? Because
Yeah.
you're a banker, so you have to understand that P&L.
Yeah.
And so making sure that P&L is clean and you're doing it for the business, you're going to be able to afford everything else just fine.
Yeah.
Right. But it's the big expenditures that you're running through the business that are hurting your value drive.
So people could be saving, let's say, pennies on paying taxes throughout their ownership, but then they're losing dollars when it really matters.
Exactly.
When you're young, you're healthy, you're energetic, you can always drive that next sale. But as you start to wind down, you lose energy. That's really when you need to rely on what you've done to that point.
Yeah.
Would you say that a business owner who focuses on building the balance sheet and not just mitigating taxes annually is able to build a greater value over time in their business than if they have to sprint with you when they come?
100%. But it's not just the balance sheet. Okay. So keep in mind today, you have a lot of buyers that are really investors. So you have private equity groups, you have family offices. Synergistic buyers are going to come in, and that's going to be a good blend. They're going to add your product line, or they're going to take over your company because you guys do the same thing. But if you're looking at PE or family offices who are paying higher multiples, they're looking for a really well-run business. So you kind of have to think about something broader than the balance sheet. So first of all, you have your human capital. So how good is your talent pool, right? Then you have your structural capital. So do you have everything documented? Do you have standard operating procedures? Do you have everything that could be copyrighted or protected done, right? Because there's value in that.
In your intellectual property.
Intellectual property is huge.
They think, oh, maybe I don't have IP because I don't develop software, or I didn't invent an idea. But what you're saying is, hey, take another look. And you and I both know somebody who can come in and identify.
Right.
Well, you actually do have that.
Yes. And that's key. I mean, just the name of your company and your website and things like that's valuable, right? Then you look at your customer value, right? So what's your customer like? Are you well diversified, or are you too heavily concentrated? That's a big no-no. And then with your customers, are they repeat customers or are they reoccurring customers? So you have reoccurring revenue, huge driver in the value.
As opposed to just transactional customers, here today, gone tomorrow, one-time hits.
100%. And then lastly, your social capital. And that's your culture. So you have to have a really good culture, because chances are you as a business owner, you're going to sell and you're going to depart, but the rest of the people are going to stay there, and they need to be really happy. And then you also need to be, how are you plugged into your community? Like, do you and your team go out and support the community, the nonprofit organizations, or what else do you do in the community to show that you care? And so those 4 C's really drive value beyond the balance sheet.
So if there's a good guy in the world of finance, you're the good guy.
I like to think so. Yeah, you really are, because you coordinate your resources. You're outside of the business and you have the expertise. As a business owner, the deck's really stacked against us because we know what we know about our business, but we don't know about all the investment vehicles. We don't know about insurance. We're told get term and forget whole. And then others come and say, well, no, you need a little term, but man, you're dumb if you don't get whole. All of the, and then, universal, and there's all these really exotic, risky investments that are out there. And we don't necessarily know, who's the fox, right? Right.
Or who's the Jiminy Cricket. We don't know.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you really went deep with that business owner and what they can do now to start preparing for their exit. What I'd like to do now is talk about that individual who's in their 60s. They're watching this podcast somehow. I don't know, maybe their grandchild or their son or daughter, they said, hey, you really need to watch this. And they're hearing a lot of these things for the first time. They've never had this conversation with their current wealth advisor, but they're in the market for one. What would you say to that person?
Well, I think it's like anything. If you had a doctor tell you that you had a major illness, it's probably time to get a second opinion. And we offer second opinions, no cost, no obligation. We sit down for them with 45 minutes over Zoom, in person, preferably one of the two, and really identify what they have, what they need, and what they're doing, and give them some really good guidance from that point. And we're hoping that if they're really satisfied with our offering compared to what they are currently getting, that they hire us. But there's a lot of me out there. So there's really good firms out there, and I'm happy to introduce you to those. If something that said, oh, like once we often hear, I still want to be close to my advisor. So, that age group of demographics that we're dealing with is the baby boomer generation, and they still like to go kick tires. So they're not so enamored with doing everything virtually. So periodically you have to line them up with somebody who's in their area, whether it's the Bay Area or LA or Orange County or Southern, further south than we are. So whatever the case may be, we're happy to be that first stop, get a second opinion. We'll be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could tell you if you're watching out there, Scott's the pro. He's going to take care of you. If you have this need, contact him, whether it's him or someone else. Like you said, he's going to be the guy that quarterbacks your next steps. And I want to end this now on a positive note. And we're going to have to limit the next segment. But if you could just share some success stories, talk about possibly different phases. So someone who came to you earlier than later, someone maybe came to you later. And then also if you have a story of how you were able to find opportunity when someone came to you thinking there may not be a lot of opportunity. So if you can give us some case studies, let's end this on a positive note.
Sure. One that comes to mind recently, probably just right after COVID, we had a gentleman who didn't even think his business was of any value. And we realized that it was probably worth about $1.5 million. So better than zero. However, we were able to coach him up and change a few things in the business and then find a synergistic buyer who really wanted to expand into his territory. So it's basically building maintenance. And so apartment complexes and commercial buildings and that. And so we end up selling that business for about $4 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And that turnaround was inside 18 months.
Wow.
Where
I love it.
Yeah. So that was a really fun success story. One that's fun right now is working with a client who identified the fact that they had too much customer concentration in their plastic molding business. And so now they're expanding into other areas of plastic molding, and they're driving the value way beyond they need to, because we've already identified that we can exit the business and net what they need, but they're having more fun now because they put the proper structure in the business. They're doing their 90-day sprints and they're having fun, and they bought a new truck and an Airstream, and they're enjoying life while they're doing it. But at the same time, they're still driving value, and it's more about their legacy now, not about them.
And so I just want to be very clear here that everyone understands this. When they came to you, they had no idea what you do, how you do it, and the fact that you could do it for them.
Correct. Yeah. That was the fun part, is we are typically introduced by somebody else on their trusted advisor team. We call them centers of influence. And so somebody that they're trusted already working with, they send them to us, and when we explain to them what they do, and a lot of times they're like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work, but let's do it. And then when we get them through the process, they're like, why didn't I do this earlier?
Yes.
Which is almost always the case. Like, why didn't I do this earlier?
Yeah. So guys, if you're listening or watching, do this now, right?
Yeah, right.
And what came to mind is The Price is Right. So I was an only child growing up. I used to watch a lot of TV, and there was always that prize behind the door, and there was like so much anticipation. And I can just see, when people call you, you just open up that door and there's something behind it that has value. So let's just talk about the first example you gave. Zero.
Yeah.
They shut down their business. They get zero. What are they going to do? So my favorite sushi restaurant in Rancho Bernardo, the individual shut his business down, and it was a thriving business. It was a type of business where if you walked in on a Friday and you didn't have a reservation, you may be able to get in right before they closed. Wow. Right? Yeah. So he shut his business down. The primary sushi chef, who everyone loved, is now working at another sushi restaurant in I would say, marginal part of town. And a lot of people, most of his clientele have not transitioned to him. And when we go to the sushi restaurant, the food quality is there, but it's bare, it's vacant. And so that was an individual who obviously didn't find you. And he had a thriving business that I know he could have sold for an amount of money, but in fact, he got zero for it. He shut it down and exited the lease. You come in and you show them what's possible. For the first example, from 0 to 4 million, when you thought maybe $1.5 million. So you even found more than what your initial assessment said. And so I just really love what you do, because when people are exiting, again, I've said it before, but that's really when they need that safety and security. And if they're just relying on a 401k, they're number one, going to pay taxes.
Right.
But then they're getting up every day and wondering what's the market doing.
Right. You have market risks. Right. So what happens if you retire and all of a sudden the market drops like it did in 2000 and you have half your portfolio? If that happens when you're 80, that's a different time. Right. But if it happens when you just retired, changes your trajectory of your entire retirement.
Got it. Scott, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And I'm really excited about the people that I work with and just people who stumble on this video, watching it, learning. And I hope people call you because of it.
Well, I thank you very much for the opportunity, Ryan. You're an amazing podcaster. I will tell you that much. And I think that our listeners will get a lot of value from this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.